Okay, you can see we're trying to do a little special thing today. We've got some people joining in remotely. Ottawa is trying to figure out some different ways to deliver education. So we still got a few minutes before we start, but I have some online students that I'm teaching the same material to right now, and we're about on the tail end of their session for the fall 2. So we've got a couple students that are going to join in that way, and then there might be some other faculty. We just got this piece of hardware in, and in theory what we'll be doing is I'll have some Brady Bunch heads up there so that while I'm talking I can kind of see your faces and look over to them. That's kind of the idea. So that it's basically, we'll just leave it static probably. But that's all I do is, I'm going to be right here. So this should be fine. No, I'd like to see it. We might need to move it closer so that they can see what I'm writing on the board.
This here, if we just zoom in.
And bring it, oh, you can zoom? Yeah. Just a clarity stage?
Actually, it's better. Do you want to write something and see if...
Yeah. Oh yeah, looks good. Yeah.
So if you paraphrase what you say.
Nope. It's going to be whiteboard and lecture.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, looks like it's about time to get going. We'll see if we get anybody in there. Does anybody have any questions before we start? All right, I'm going to start you off with a picture today. It's a graph, so don't get. It's not that good of a picture, I suppose, in that regard. So I want to think about an individual's labor supply, an individual person's labor supply. So we've done quite a few supply and demand curves so far, and we got that upward sloping look. We're going to measure labor hours here. So we got the L, I'll just go ahead and put labor hours. And then we've got the wage. Now, as you're thinking about how many hours to supply to the market, what are some things that go into your mind? Like, if you're going to work, maybe you guys are working part-time, what are some things that really go into your mind on the supply of labor? How many hours you want to work? What are some things that enter your little equation as you're thinking about it? How much money you're going to get paid? Good. What else? What other factors? So how much paid?
Quality of the work, I guess. Like, I guess that sounds like it's depending on you, but basically what the work environment is.
Okay. Desirability of the work environment. The benefits, okay? So there might be some other things besides just straight pay. Other things?
Like when you can work?
Okay, when you can work. So timing, right? Okay, when you can work. Okay? Let the tech guys get it on like, somebody's speaking. Well, wait a second, that sounded like me awfully. All right, so timing. How many hours in a day? 24. So when we talk about pay for people, that can vary. But does time vary for anyone? No, that's a binding constraint. We've talked about constraints a lot in this class. That's a binding constraint that we all face. So what does that equation look like? 24 equals what?
24.
That would be true. But I'm thinking about our time of allocation. 12 plus 12 if what? Let's talk econ instead of math. What's that, Mallory?
Well, if you do 12 plus 12, would be like 12 hours a day, working 12 hours a day.
Okay, so we've got hours of work, right? So we've got hours of work. What else is in this equation?
Other.
Sleep. There could be just another, but sleep. Okay, hours of sleep plus recreation, fun, goof off time, whatever. Recreation. Now, all of you might have a bunch of things that you can do. And so what economists do is lump everything this direction into a nice little category called leisure. Now you can bring in sleep. In fact, I did a little bit of that with my dissertation work. I entered a sleep time into it. So if you have data collected on that stuff, great, you can use it. But otherwise, for the most part, we can just think of leisure. So we've got work and leisure. Hours of work plus hours of leisure have to add up to 24. All right, back to our graph over here then. What economists have found is that some of these supply curves look like this, which is awfully weird, isn't it? So labor supply, a supply curve that looks really curvy. What the heck would be going on here? Let's try to dissect that. Let's start over here. What's this endpoint? Labor supply, an individual person's labor supply. What is this vertical intercept here representing? This is you as a person, because this is the individual's labor supply curve.
The least we're willing to work for.
All right, the entry pay, right? What economists call your reservation wage. What is the wage that gets you off the couch? The reservation wage. The absolute minimum in order to start working that'll induce you into working some time. Now, as we think about our allocation of time during the day, we start thinking about these trade-offs. I work some hours, I can't have fun in other ways. I work some hours, I lose some sleep, right? So we got this trade-off going on. And so in order to induce us to continue to work more hours, the story that we told when we started this chapter is that the wage needs to go up, right? So the wage needed to go up for what reason? What was the reason that the amount to induce another hour of work at the margin? So if you're currently working 8 hours, why do we need to pay you a little more to get you to work the 9th hour? You're losing leisure time, right? There's an opportunity cost to your time. We all face a binding time constraint, and so there's a cost involved. And that cost is increasing at the margin because as you start to work more hours, doesn't your leisure become more precious, right? You're losing leisure. As we increase the workload, you're losing leisure, therefore making each additional hour of leisure more and more precious, therefore forcing you to pay more for using it up. So the wage was going up for a while. Now let's talk about this curvy part. What's going on up here at the top?
Once we make enough money, we don't have to work as many hours to be comfortable with our finances.
All right, so we've got two things battling on each other called the income effect and substitution effect. So once we get up to decent pay, and we're working ourselves pretty hard, this is a hypothetical person maybe putting in 11-hour days, and we say, well, we're paying you $30 an hour effectively. That's nice. You get to a point where I might be able to command more pay because of the skills that I've learned on the job or whatever, but I'm not willing to bust my butt like I was when I graduated from college and I was a 20-something trying to climb my way up the corporate ladder or whatever the case is, I've been able to work smarter over time, utilizing my education I got at OU along with my skills that I gained on the job. And so I might get up here, and if you offer me to pay 40, I want to start spending a little time with my family in addition to work, right? Because leisure is important to you too. So leisure is a normal good. Whoa, normal, inferior. I thought we were done with those chapters. Well, we're not. Everything kind of builds on itself here, right? When did we do supply and demand? That was pretty long ago as well. So a normal good was what? What was the relationship between a couple things if it was a normal good? We can go to beer and pizza here. Maybe we could go to Keystone and Bud, or we can go to pizza, and we can think about ramen noodles versus some T-bone steaks. Sawyer? Okay, as price, is it price, first of all? It's income. So with price, we're on the demand curve. But with income, as income goes up, what do you do with normal goods? Buy more or less of them? More. So as your income goes up, you buy more normal goods. Is leisure a good or a bad for you? Do you like leisure, or do you like it, right? So the more income you have, the more of that good you'd like to consume. So as we increase our income, we'd like to consume more leisure. That's the income effect. So the income effect is, in the labor market here, is that as your income increases, you want to consume more leisure. You want to consume more leisure. The substitution effect is the one we've been working on. Is as our wage goes up, as our income goes up, an increase in income leads you to more work or less leisure. Less leisure, more work as the wage goes up. So those two things are always battling each other. And so when you've put in the 40-hour work week and your boss tells you to come in time, they say, well, I'll pay you time and a half, right? Or they want to induce you to come in. They have to give you that little extra bump, possibly by law, but otherwise just to induce you to come in if you're putting in some extra time. You're kind of battling that thing. Well, it'd be kind of worth it. Maybe it would be worth it to go to work, right? That's the substitution effect tugging in your gut. But the income effect is like, oh, well, it sure would be nice to not have to do that. So these two things are kind of continuously battling, and each individual has their own look to this. Some individuals, it might just go up and kind of get vertical, but they are just workaholics, right? So a workaholics one might go up. Again, they faced a binding constraint somewhere here of 24 hours. Sleep is required, the last time I checked, in these other courses we teach at Ottawa, right? So if you can live on 4 hours of sleep, maybe you can work 20 hours, but we all face some sort of constraint that way. All right, questions or comments on that? All right, so for the market, I want to put this extra note here. The market supply is composed of many individuals and with many individuals, and I should say many different unique individuals. the market supply curve is composed of many individuals with various reservation wages, income effects, and substitution effects. And so if we start behavior supply curve that looks more like what we've been talking about for the most part, again, it might curve up towards the end, but there's probably somebody out there that we can induce off the couch, right? So the market supply curve would tend to be mostly upward sloping. All right. The other thing I wanted to talk about today was minimum wage. Minimum wage is a hot button topic. If you guys haven't been listening to the news at all, really President Obama brought up strong way. So I want to use the tools that we've had in class to think about the implications of minimum wage. Now, we've already done this a couple times when we looked at price floors. What did a price floor or minimum wage lead to? A surplus. And if it's the labor market, what's another name for surplus labor? Unemployed. For labor and a supply of labor. Just kind of a standard looking thing here. If we're in the labor market, who's the demand curve? Households? People? Businesses? Businesses, right. So don't forget that. Now that we're in the labor market, the demand curve's the businesses, the supply curve's the individuals, thinking about the labor-leisure trade-off, right? So you got households up here, businesses down here. Businesses are making their decision on whether they should hire an extra person based on what? Oh boy, you're going to see that one next week for the finals. You better have that. Profit maximization is the overarching thing. So a little more detail to that. Caleb, did I hear you say something? Marginal something, not the cost part. Product, that was part of it. We're starting to piece together. Marginal product related with what determines whether you should hire an extra person? When would it be a good idea if you are a profit maximizer and you're hiring an additional person? If it adds to your profit or it subtracts to your profit? When do we know that it adds to our profit? What's the elements needed to calculate the benefit, the marginal benefit of an additional person? When you produce more, which is the marginal product aspect of it, but that's combined with what? What do you do with that extra product that they made? You sell it. So we called it a special thing. We're almost there. Begins with a V. The value of marginal product. There you go.
Teamwork, guys.
The value of the marginal product, the VMP curve. Remember that? So if I kick off an extra amount of hamburgers and I make 100 hamburgers and each hamburger can be sold for $4, I just generated $400 worth of revenue for my company that day. What's the most that that company should be willing to pay me to do that? Well, $400, right? So that is the benefit to the company. All right, so back to our minimum wage story. Suppose that the minimum wage is our current level of $7.25. And let's just say that the market would clear at something less than that. Maybe it's down here at 5 or something. I don't know. We don't even have to mark that. At $7.25 set by law, we have a price floor. Was the technical thing, but it's called the minimum wage. At that price, there's a whole bunch of people that would like to work. The quantity supplied, which is our individuals thinking about the labor-leisure trade-off, those people would like to be working at QS1, some quantity that is less than the value of the marginal product of the last person hired due to the minimum wage, the demand for workers at 725 is here at QD1. And as was stated, these are your unemployed people. These people have jobs at the minimum wage. Okay, now, what would this rectangle be? Thinking back to when we did that exercise, what could that possibly represent, that rectangle? Just kind of want to motivate your brains again on what we did in the welfare chapter, the welfare analysis chapter. What would that represent? I'm just looking for an interpretation. So we have 100 people unemployed, and what would this rectangle represent if it was something? It'd be a number, of course. $7.25 times the number of people unemployed. The wages they could be earning. And I'm really pushing you here. I don't have an exact answer of what that is. That's really nothing in terms of what's going on, because there is something called unemployment claims and unemployment insurance, right? You get out of a job, you file for unemployment, the federal government starts sending you a check. That's unemployment insurance. That's part of our whole system. That's not what this is, but I just kind of wanted to get you thinking that the government is spending money on the unemployed. Now, when people, you guys, well, some of you have had macro class. Maybe I should push you on this. To be unemployed, was that everybody who's not working? No. What did you have to be in order to be considered unemployed? Looking for work or seeking work, right? Now, if somebody's kind of frustrated, you know, the economy's bad and they can't seem to find a job, they'd be willing to work at 725, but there just seems to be nothing out there, and they end up exiting the labor force. Those were our kind of discouraged workers that we had. Then they are no longer unemployed. But what might they need to do if they're not earning any income? What might they need to take advantage of to kind of put food on the plate? Assistance program. They could go to private churches. They could go to, you know, lots of different places. The government might be on the welfare rolls in some capacity. So that's kind of the danger of unemployment. We either got unemployment claims or potentially driving people towards needing some other form of assistance. All right. Now, if we raise the minimum wage to $9, which was proposed, if we raise the minimum wage to $9, what is your prediction of what happens? Greater surplus. So let's kind of characterize some of these now. So if we increase minimum wage from $7.25 to $9, we're going to, one, increase the unemployed. And we see that here in this vertical distance. And that comes through two forms, by the way. Would more people like to go to work if they could get $9? Yeah. Yes, so again, the labor force went up. The number of people looking for work went up. But unfortunately, the number of jobs offered went down because employers facing the higher wage would have to cut back on the number of people being hired. Okay, so these are just some of the results. I don't think there is an economist in the world that would argue down at least a little. What's kind of current in the up, but hey, everybody, maybe they're too society's perspective, maybe it's okay that we all pay a little bit more for our burgers, and it's just a good thing to do. So, in fact, some economists estimated it was going to be about a 25% hike in burger prices, by the way, at the store. So if you're paying a couple bucks, it'd be about a 25% increase is what was estimated if minimum wage would jump up, since you have an industry that has a lot of minimum wage workers. So we've got an increase in the unemployed, a decrease in the employed, which I know sounds kind of redundant, but I'd like to point that out. A decrease in the employed. And then, now I really want to push you. What does places like McDonald's and fast food places and other places that use low to no skill workers, over time, what are they going to do if there's a jump to 9, and by the way, there's pressure for it to go all the way up to 15, right? They're talking about the living wage stuff, and so there's protests going on. I think it was maybe even today or yesterday of getting the wages up to maybe even $15 an hour. So I'm just thinking maybe it would be 9, it would be the new policy, but maybe there'd be even future increases. What does that do for the businesses in terms of how they provide you hamburgers? Think about their behavior. What's their incentive for them to do?
Quality would look happy.
Quality, maybe. Let's say that they're outstanding and they want to maintain quality.
Hire people who are better at what they're doing.
Okay, more productive people would be a good step, which they'll have the luxury of doing, by the way, because people who aren't productive, they're not going to get their 9, right? So that does give them a little bit of an angle to try to keep the most productive workers. What else, though? Imagine a McDonald's restaurant. You're at the counter. What are you looking at as you look across the counter into the McDonald's? Okay, not less people. Why? Why might there be less people 5 years from now if this was adopted as opposed to today? What could McDonald's potentially do more of? Motorize, computerize, more mechanical stuff. Things that use labor now, maybe there's a machine that could be invented to do that particular thing, right? So there would be this kind of move towards more capital that might be able to replace labor. So that's an important distinction as well. I think business would continue to seek labor substitutes. So technology, machines and technology, there'd be all the more incentive to continue that march down the road. Now let's say they're successful. They come up with a couple more machines that knock out a few jobs. How does that help or hurt the unemployment rate? It hurts, right? So again, we've created something that might be down the road even giving incentives to create more unemployment. Mallory?
Well, even if you do raise the wage, when circulating more money to the world, everything's costing more now, but you're
Long story short, no. But that one takes a little, I'll talk to you after class, and we can talk more about that. So the fraction of people that we'd be impacting would be kind of a drop of water in the bucket, and so it wouldn't have that type of impact potentially. All right, so we've got businesses substituting. I'm just kind of curious if one of you people over here, I just want to hear the audio come through. Give me a shout. Tom, can you give me a shout, Tom? I know he's experienced with.
I would, but I can't hear a thing you're saying.
Okay, so no audio. Oh, you can. Oh, you're kidding. See, he's a joker. He's one of my colleagues in the business school. He's up in Overland Park right now. So, all right, thank you. I just wanted to be able to hear the. And if any of you have questions that are on, feel free to unmute your microphone, and I'd be happy to stop too. Okay, so one more. My last thing that I'm getting kind of small down there on is the burger argument, that we'll just pay for more burgers. I want to challenge that a little bit because I think that's a reasonable argument on the face of it, and I had to think a little bit harder about that. So conclusion number 4 down here, result number 4, I think we'd have an increase in the price of hamburgers. I'm just going to use hamburgers in general, but low to no skill products that have a large fraction of those workers, ultimately their price would go up. So an increase in the price of hamburgers to kind of pass the buck, if you will, to the consumers. And that would leave burger consumers with the burden of the minimum wage directly, right? Which isn't all bad, by the way. If we had people who are eating burgers would help support that minimum wage. But that's, from an economist standpoint, that's kind of what's going on. If that's, we raise minimum wage, it doesn't affect the high-tech industry. They don't have any minimum wage workers, right? So we're talking about particular sectors or industries that would be affected in that, and that would be the result. Now, let's go on to another option. By the way, this is all new to me, this thought. I was thinking of you guys when I listened to NPR just yesterday, and they were talking about minimum wage. And then it dawned on me, well, what would be the impact of that deficiency thing that we did? So remember the target price program? It was a little more complicated. Does anybody remember what the target price deal was? We had grain, we were talking about corn, and we say, hey, what if the government does this instead? Anybody remember what we did?
Wasn't it where the government thought that corporations should get this much money on something, so they let the market have them purchase that?
They let the market have the purchase, right. Yes.
And then the government paid the corporations the difference.
So they were trying to help out the farmers in that case, right? I had the corn market, so this would be measuring corn, and the person we're trying to help, or the group we're trying to help, is the farmers. We don't think that wheat prices should be below $9, and so let's help out the farmers. That was the intent of the policy. And of course, the intent of the policy here is to help the workers with low to no skill jobs that fall into this category. So what if we, in a similar fashion, decided to give a target wage of $9 to workers? All workers in the United States get a target wage of $9. Not much different than the minimum wage, right? I mean, you can't pay below minimum, but you're going to get $9. So that workers know they're going to get $9. So here's how that plays through. I'm just going to go through the exact same steps that we did in class. So now the government says, here's the target of $9. We're going to eliminate minimum wage. So instead of raising the current minimum wage from $7.25 to $9, which is on the table in a big way, or it's going to go up some amount, I'm pretty sure. What if we said, let's scrap that. Let's abolish minimum wage and set a target wage of $9 so that every American knows that they're going to get at least $9 at the end of the day for every hour that they work. Okay, that's the concept. The number of people that would like to work at $9 is this amount. QS2, let's call it. Now again, if it was the minimum wage, it would be the same amount of people. But these people, this would be the unemployment amount. And then we're going to allow companies to hire as many people as they want at the best wage that they can get, right? So we're just going to let the market clear. the companies in the market are really doing different things, right? Governments come out with legislation, hey people, 9's the best you're going to, 9 is the minimum you're going to get. Go out and find a job. Just go out and find a job. You find a $3 job, take it. I'll pay you $6. You find a $1 job, take it. I'll pay you $8. Right? That's the concept. You go out and find a job, and the government will make up the difference. So the market is going to clear this many workers. So up to the demand curve, we're going to have companies competing for those people that want to work. Nothing's changed with the incentives of the companies who want to hire the most skilled person, right? If the value of their marginal product is something higher, well, they're going to hire them as much as they have every incentive they did before. So this then creates the market price, the market wage. And I'm just kind of making up numbers. Let's just say that it falls all the way down to $4. Now this, I got to make clear, is not due to any sort of research whatsoever. And in fact, what would economists need to estimate to figure out whether that number is 4 or whether that number is 7 or whether that number is 6? What's that going to depend on? Somebody hit me with chapter 4.
S&P.
The what?
S&P.
No, not S&P. What's that going to depend on? Kind of. What's this mean? Ah, elasticity. Sawyer, extra credit. Nice. Elasticity. Sawyer, +1. All right, so let's use a little golf club theory here to check out what happens. So if the elasticity of demand is flatter, you can see this endpoint starting to come up, right?
Right.
So that's starting to come up. If it's steeper, then it's going to come down a little bit. But then there'd be less of an effect up here. There'd be less people unemployed. So all of these things depend on the elasticity of demand and supply. Okay. So the government's going to cut a check under my numbers here of $5 for every hour worked. We're going to have a lot of people working, and we're going to have government spending, which is kind of a lot, right? Again, we can't even say those words a lot or a little because we don't have any real numbers. This is just Russ having fun on the whiteboard, right? So, but it looks like a big old square here. So I don't want to downplay the fact that the government would be spending money. But do they spend money now?
Yes.
Yes. So one of the important things that Ronald Coase, one of my favorite economists, talked about was how important it is to compare new policy to the status quo. We're not necessarily trying to say eliminate government spending or whatever, but let's take what reality is and say, can I improve reality with a different policy? So what are we spending money on now? We kind of reviewed this earlier. What are the things that the government spends money on in relationship to the labor market, I should say? You guys are bringing up lots of things, which are great. Unemployment claims, so unemployment insurance. How much unemployment's going on here? None. No unemployment in this particular sector. Now, again, this is the macroeconomic topic. There's going to be job turnover, so you might lose a job and get a job, so you might have some unemployment. But as far as that longer structural unemployment, that persistent unemployment, that all of a sudden kind of disappears. All right, so now we've got incentive to go find a job. There's plenty of jobs, by the way, too, right? Because employers are free to pay whatever the market bears, $1 an hour, $2 an hour, $3 an hour, right? And workers are free to choose where they work. If $1 an hour is not enough, if that's not their reservation wage, then they go work for somebody else. So don't forget the underlying competitive market going on where firms are trying to bid for good people, right? So that whole thing's going on that we've talked about all semester. What other types of programs might this tend to help? What was the other things here that we're spending money on? We had unemployment claims, welfare. Okay? So the welfare incentive would be less or lower. Maybe not everybody can go for work. There's different reasons why people aren't in the labor force or aren't, but in general, the incentives wouldn't be there. Now, if that's the case, we're going to have to be careful with what those welfare programs are. If we can structure those payments so that they are set up to be structured for somebody to go out and work, because once they're working, again, it doesn't matter if they're working at a $1 job or a $5 job. They're going to get 9, right? So we're giving people incentive to work.
So what would be the incentive for the firm to pay $4, $5, they're going to get 9?
Good question. What would be the incentive for the firm to pay 4 or 5 or whatever they are paying when they know that they're getting 9? Does that change the firm's incentives at all?
When they're looking for, like you said, quality and labor.
Right. So if you've got a good person and you want to keep a good person, what do you have to do? Give them a bump in pay. So that's a competitive environment kind of separate going on so that the market pay, this market rate, can fluctuate and go up and down. And of course it's different when we take one static picture like this, we're just averaging across this. So, Caleb? The reservation wage isn't lost. It's there by the individuals. So remember when we talked about the reservation wage, if we have Tom, Dick, and Harry, and Tom's up here and he needs $5 an hour, and Dick's down here at 2, and Harry's up here at 3, if the market wage is $1, nobody's working, right? Good question. What do you have to do, though, to get the $9? You have to work. So you have to get a job to get the $9, right? So if you stay unemployed, you don't get anything. But if you jump into the labor market, no matter what you're getting, you're going to get the minimum wage, but it's not the minimum wage any longer. Okay, other questions? Yeah.
Since you're getting $9 regardless, where is the incentive to try to get a $5 job over a $1 job, so to speak?
What do you think? That's a good question. Do you have much incentive to do that? There's definitely less incentive to do that.
Well,
But can you think of any incentive, Mallory?
Are you getting both your checks at the same time?
Basic, or pretty close to each other, yes. Yeah, the checks would roll in similar fashion. So why would you want to maybe look for a different job that paid 6 instead of 4? It's a great question. What's that? Could be work environment. There could be some other factors involved. Better benefits. So there might be these extra things going on. That could be.
What if the tax is different?
Tax would be the same. We'll negate that. Well, how do you measure your worth? Do you measure it by the amount the government's giving you? Or do you measure it by the amount the employers? What about your integrity? What about your self-worth? What do you think you tend to, where would you rather be at? The company that thinks you're worth $6 an hour or the company that thinks you're only worth 4? Where would you rather be? Probably the 6, right? And I'm not saying that's a great argument towards it, because I think you guys are right that there'd be a little bit less incentive on shuffle, which in and of itself isn't too bad. But what I'm really trying to get people to better themselves is that they go from 4 up to 6. They go from 6 up to 8. And what's the real incentive to keep improving yourself, getting better skills, getting back? What's the thing that hopefully you can get to after you've put in your time? Up above 9, right? Off the government dole, right? I think there's people out there, not everybody, but I think there's people out there that would like to not be dependent upon the government, right? Not everybody, but you kind of want to earn your own keep. It's kind of the American way. I'm going to chart my own course. I'm going to do my own thing. And so I think that there would be incentive to do that. Now, the other thing that's kind of exciting about this is if companies can get labor cheaper while at the same time maintaining this $9 amount, bear in mind. But now put your profit maximizing cap on. If you can get labor cheaper, do you think that would tend to help the growth of your company or hurt the growth of your company? Help or hurt?
You're going to be getting more workers regardless.
You're going to get more workers. Is that a bad? Could that be a bad thing?
If they're not very good.
Possibly, if they're not very good. But then what do you need to do to get better workers? Raise the wage. We're right back into that competitive environment, right? So my thinking is that over time, this would start to increase the growth of companies, the growth of jobs, an increase in demand. Maybe there'd be a supply side effect to where the United States wouldn't be shipping jobs overseas or down south to Mexico. Maybe these jobs would stay at home. And maybe these companies would continue to grow, and as they grow, they need higher level managers and lower level managers and lots of different people for their organization. But as they grow, what happens to the marginal revenue and the marginal product associated with their company? As they tend to grow and prices go up, this goes up. And with this system, what happened to government spending if we get up to this point? It gets less, right? My squiggly line is shrinking. As the economy starts to go, the squiggly line is shrinking. And even possibly, if the market starts to bear $9 on its own because businesses don't feel like they're being overrun by regulations like the minimum wage, if we're a little more free to grow the company and we get up to here, a lot of magic things happen, right? Government spending is nothing. The government program disappears. Minimum wage tends to be sticky. I mean, the minimum wage has been the same for a long time, so there's probably a pretty good argument, actually, that it should be changed. If we had it there for a meaningful reason 20 years ago, then there's probably a reason for it to be different now, because the economy has changed a little bit in the last 20 years. I know most of you aren't quite age 20, but if you go back to your birth date, there's a difference between the America today and the America that was there at the time of your birth. So a lot of things have changed. The beauty of this program, that was the same beauty that we saw with the deficiency payment program in the farming market with the corn, is that it allows a possibility for the government spending to get out of the picture completely. And that we restore a market to where the living wage is there. Why? Because businesses are healthy and growing, the economy's good, all the good stuff about the economy starts to come out. Now, the interesting thing is, I'm pretty sure this has been thought of. I thought of it on my own independently. I'm not a labor economist. I hope that somebody's ran this up the flagpole and it sucks for some reason. But I think it sounds like it's got some merit. So I might dig around. I've got a few labor economist people to do. But I do think we're at a critical point where maybe the door would be open, since we're considering of raising it to minimum wage, at least to consider other policies that might get the same result without just sticking in this rut. And again, we know with certainty, again, there's no economist that would argue that there's no way it's increasing. It's only going this way if we just continue to raise the minimum wage. So I'd like to think that there's other policy solutions out there. Okay, any other questions? Let me write down some of those conclusions. I think we got just a minute left here, so that you guys, when you review your notes, you're like, what? What he said was pretty cool, but I can't remember what it was. So if we have a target price, which is really, let's say, a wage target, if we instead have a wage target equal to $9, with the government making up the difference, here's our bullet points. We'd have an increase in the number of people working, an increase in the employed, a decrease in the unemployed. We would have the government subsidy for what's called the deficiency. The deficiency payment is the difference that the government makes up between what the employer paid and what the market was at. However, counteracting that, we'd have a decrease in unemployment claims, unemployment claim spending, unemployment insurance spending. And this is where you'd have to turn to some analysis to look at the trade-offs that are going on. So unemployment spending goes down, and I'd like to think that there is a likely decrease in welfare spending, because this would induce people, give people a nice incentive to go out and work rather than to not enter the labor force at all. Again, it wouldn't be eliminating welfare. Again, there's other circumstances why people might be on programs, but it would at least tend to move it in that direction. So decrease in welfare spending relative to minimum wage legislation. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, now wouldn't that be the short run? Because when minimum wage was $4.25 and $5.35, or $4.35, then it went to $5.35, and now $7.25, it kind of adjusted in short term, but in the long run, we're back at the same problem.
Right. That's right. And so that's part of what I think I'm getting at here, is that if we bump it up, we tend to just have this persistent problem rather than maybe allowing for different correction mechanisms. Yep, good point. All right, that's it. That's a wrap. Thank you guys for joining us. Yeah, actually, that would be nice. I've got tenure coming up, so I'll take any little thing to pop in the file. If you want to just quick little note, I'll shove it in my file. That'd be great. Yeah, thank you. Okay. If it was, yeah, one of the official emails.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it can just be here.
Up here. Yeah. Yeah, we might as well use it. I appreciate you spending the time to be in there.
I was like, guys, I didn't print it off.
Get from that file.
Right. Yeah.